tangents, and we shall continue with the Count of Monte Cristo. Chapter 78. A correspondent writes from Janina. Franz had staggered out of Noirtier's room in such a confused state that even Valentine felt sorry for him. Villefort merely muttered some incoherent phrases and fled to his study, where, 2 hours later, he received the following letter. After what was revealed this morning, Monsieur Noirtier de Villefort cannot imagine any alliance to be possible between his family and that of Monsieur Franz d'Épinay. Monsieur Franz d'Épinay is appalled when he considers that Monsieur Villefort, who appeared to know about the events that were described this morning, did not anticipate his reaction. Anyone who could have seen the magistrate at that moment, stricken as he was, would not have believed that he had foreseen it. Indeed, he would never have thought that his father would be so frank or so brutal as to recount such a story. True, Monsieur Noirtier, contemptuous of his son's opinion, had never taken the trouble to elucidate the matter for Villefort, and the latter had always assumed that General Quesnel, or Baron d'Épinay, according to whether one prefers to call him by the name he made for himself or the one that was made for him, had been assassinated rather than honourably killed in a duel. This harsh letter from a young man who until then had been so respectful was devastating to the pride of someone like Villefort. Hardly had he entered his study than his wife followed. Franz's disappearance, at Monsieur Noirtier's summons, had so astonished everyone that the position of Madame de Villefort, who had remained alone with the notary and the witnesses, had become more and more embarrassing. Eventually she made up her mind and left, announcing that she was going to find out what had happened. Villefort told her only that, after a dispute between himself, Monsieur Noirtier and Monsieur d'Épinay, Franz's engagement to Valentine had been broken off. This was not easy to relay to the people who were still waiting, so Madame de Villefort went back and said simply that Monsieur Noirtier had suffered some kind of apoplectic seizure at the start of the meeting, so the signature of the contract had naturally been postponed for a few days. This news, false though it was, made such a singular impression, coming after 2 other misfortunes of the same kind, that all of them looked at one another in astonishment, then left without a word. Meanwhile Valentine, at once happy and appalled, after embracing and thanking the weak old man who had with just a single blow shattered a bond that she had already come to consider indissoluble, asked if she could retire so that she could recover, and Noirtier, with a look, gave her permission to do so. However, instead of going up to her room, Valentine went out and down the corridor, then, leaving by the little door, ran into the garden. In the midst of all the events that had taken place, one after the other, her mind had been constantly tormented by a vague apprehension. From one moment to the next, she expected to see Morel burst in, pale and threatening like the Laird of Ravenswood at the betrothal of Lucy of Lammermoor. As it happened, she reached the gate just in time. Maximilien, guessing what was about to take place when he saw Franz leave the cemetery with Monsieur de Villefort, had followed him. Then, after seeing him enter, he saw him come out again, then return with Château-Renard. He could no longer have any doubt. He hurried to his field, ready for anything, sure that Valentine would come there to him as soon as the opportunity presented itself. He had been right. His eye pressed to the fence, he saw the young woman run towards the gate, without taking any of her usual precautions. At first glance, Maximilien was reassured, and at her first word he leapt with joy. "Saved!" Valentine said. "Saved?" Morel repeated, unable to believe such good fortune. "By whom are we saved?" "By my grandfather. Oh, Morel, love him dearly." Morel swore to love the old man with all his soul, and the oath cost him nothing, for at that moment he did not merely love him like a friend or a father, he adored him as a god. "But how did it happen?" Morel asked. "What strange means did he employ?" Valentine opened her mouth to tell him everything, but then considered that there was a dreadful secret behind all this that did not belong only to her grandfather. "Later," she said. "I shall tell you everything later." "When?" "When I am your wife." This put the conversation on a plane which made it easy for Morel to understand anything, so he understood that he must be content with what he knew, and that this was enough for one day. However, he agreed to leave only on the promise that he would see Valentine the following evening. She gave him her promise. Everything had changed in her eyes, and it was certainly easier for her now to believe that she would marry Morel than it had been an hour earlier to believe that she would not marry Franz. While this was going on, Madame de Villefort had gone up to see Noirtier. The old man looked at her with the stern, dark eye that he usually turned on her. "Monsieur," she said, "I do not need to tell you that Valentine's engagement has been broken off, because this is where the breach occurred." Noirtier gave no sign of emotion. "But," Madame de Villefort went on, "what you do not know, monsieur, is that I was always opposed to the match, which was to take place in spite of my objections." Noirtier looked inquiringly at his daughter-in-law. "Well, now that the engagement is broken off, and I was always aware of your distaste for it, I have come with a request that neither Monsieur de Villefort nor Valentine could make." Noirtier's eyes asked what this could be. "I have come, monsieur," Madame de Villefort went on, "as the only person who has a right to do so, being the only one who has nothing to gain from it, to beg you to restore to your granddaughter, not your goodwill, since she has always had that, but your fortune." Noirtier's eyes remained unsure for an instant, clearly seeking the motives behind this demand and unable to find them. "Am I right to hope, monsieur," Madame de Villefort said, "that your intentions were in harmony with the request I have just made?" "Yes," said Noirtier. "In that case, monsieur," she concluded, "I shall leave you with both gratitude and contentment." And bowing to him, she went out of the room. The following day, Noirtier duly called for the notary. The first will was torn up, and a new one made, under which he left his entire fortune to Valentine, on condition that she was not separated from him. Some people in society therefore calculated that Mademoiselle de Villefort, heiress to the Marquis and Marquise de Saint-Marin and now restored to her grandfather's favour, would one day have an income of nearly 300,000 livres. While the engagement was being broken off at the Villeforts, the Comte de Morcerf received a visit from Monte Cristo, and, to show Danglars how eager he was, he put on his lieutenant general's dress uniform, the one he had decked out with all his decorations, and called for his best horses. In this finery he trotted round to the Rue de la Chasse-d'Antin and had himself announced to Danglars, who was going over his end-of-the-month accounts. In recent weeks this had not been the best time to meet the banker if one wanted to find him in a good mood. So, at the sight of his old friend, Danglars put on his most majestic air and drew himself up in his chair. Morcerf, contrary to his usual straight-laced manner, was wearing a jolly, affable smile. Since he was more or less certain that his suit would be received favourably, he did not bother with diplomatic niceties, but came straight to the point. "Here I am, Baron," he said. "For a long time we have been beating about the bush over what we said." As he began speaking, Morcerf expected the banker's face to relax, attributing its lowering expression to his silence, but, on the contrary, the face became still more cold and impassive, though one would hardly have deemed this possible. This was why Morcerf had stopped in the middle of his sentence. "What did we say, Monsieur le Comte?" the banker asked, as if searching his memory for an explanation of the general's meaning. "Ah, I see," the Count said. You are going to respect the formalities, my dear sir, and want to remind me that protocol requires us to follow the proper procedure. Very well, so be it. You must forgive me. I only have one son, and this is the first time I have considered marrying him, so I am still a novice in these matters. Right, I'll do as you wish." And with a forced smile he got up, made a deep bow to Danglars, and said, "Baron, I have the honour to ask for the hand of Mademoiselle Eugénie Danglars, your daughter, for my son, Viscount Albert de Morcerf." However, instead of receiving these words in the favourable manner that Morcerf would have expected, Danglars raised an eyebrow, and, without inviting the Count, who was still standing, to sit down, said, "Monsieur le Comte, I shall have to consider the matter before giving you a reply." "Consider?" Morcerf exclaimed with mounting astonishment. "Haven't you had time to consider in the 8 years since we first mentioned this match?" "Every day, Count," Danglars said, "we find that we are obliged to reconsider things in the light of new considerations." "What do you mean?" Morcerf asked. "I don't follow you, Baron." "I mean, monsieur, that in the past fortnight certain new circumstances—" "One moment, I beg you," said Morcerf. "Are you serious, or is this some game we are playing?" "What game?" "Yes, let us put our cards on the table." "That's all I ask." "You have seen Monte Cristo?" "I see him quite often," said Danglars, tugging his chin. "He's a friend of mine." "Well, last time you saw him, you told him that I seemed vague and uncertain where this match is concerned." "Quite so." "Well, here I am, neither vague nor forgetful, as you can see, since I have come to ask you to keep your promise." Danglars said nothing. "Have you changed your mind?" Morcerf added, "or are you forcing me to make an explicit request just for the pleasure of humiliating me?" Danglars realized that, if the conversation were to continue along these lines, it would be to his disadvantage. So he said, "Monsieur le Comte, you must be justifiably surprised by my coolness. I understand that, so, believe me, you cannot regret it more than I do myself. But I assure you it is required by circumstances beyond my control." "That's all very well, my dear sir," said the Count, "and your average visitor might be satisfied with such mumbo-jumbo. But the Comte de Morcerf is not your average visitor, and when a man like myself comes to see another, when he reminds him of a promise and the other fails to keep his word, then he has the right to demand on the spot that he at least be given a good reason." Danglars was a coward, but he did not wish to appear one. He was irritated by Morcerf's tone. "I have plenty of good reasons," he answered. "And what do you mean by that?" "That there is a good reason, but not one that I can easily give you." "I suppose you must realize, however," said Morcerf, "that your reservations are of little use to me. And in any event, one thing seems clear, which is that you are rejecting the match." "No," said Danglars, "I am postponing a decision, that's all." "You surely cannot be expecting that I should submit to your whim and wait quietly and humbly until you are more favourably disposed." "Very well then, Count. If you cannot wait, consider our arrangement annulled." The Count bit his lip until it bled in order to restrain himself from the outburst that his proud and irascible temperament urged him to make. Realizing, however, that in these circumstances he was the one who would appear ridiculous, he was already making his way to the door of the room when he changed his mind and returned. A cloud had passed across his brow, replacing injured pride with a hint of uncertainty. "Come, my dear Danglars," he said, We have known one another for many years, and should consequently show some consideration for one another. You owe me an explanation, and the least I can ask is that you should tell me what unfortunate event has caused my son to forfeit your good intentions towards him. It is nothing personal to the Viscount. That's all I can tell you, monsieur. Danglars replied, becoming impertinent again when he saw that Morcerf was giving ground. So, to whom is it personal? Morcerf asked in a strangled voice, the colour draining from his face. Danglars noted each of these symptoms and stared at the Count with unusual self-confidence. You should be grateful to me for refusing to clarify the matter, he said. A nervous shudder, doubtless the product of repressed anger, shook Morcerf. He made a supreme effort to contain himself. I have the right, he said, and the intention of requiring the satisfaction of an explanation. Do you have something against Madame de Morcerf? Is it that my wealth is insufficient, or my political opinions the contrary of yours? None of that, monsieur, said Danglars. In those cases it would be unforgivable, since I knew all that when I entered the agreement. Look no further. I am truly ashamed of having made you suggest such things. Believe me, we should leave it there. Let's settle for a simple delay, which will be neither an engagement nor a breach. For heaven's sake, there is no hurry. My daughter is 17 and your son 21. Time will move on even as we pause, and events will occur. Things that appear obscure one day are sometimes only too clear the next. In that way, the cruelest slanders can vanish from one day to the next. Slanders? Did you say slanders, monsieur? Morcerf cried, white as a sheet. Someone is slandering me? I tell you, Count, look no further. So I must accept this rejection without a murmur? It is above all painful for me. Yes, more than for you, because I was counting on the honour of a match with you. And a broken engagement always looks worse for the girl than for her fiancé. Very well, monsieur. Let's say no more, Morcerf muttered, and, angrily slapping his gloves, left the room. Danglars noticed that not once had Morcerf dared to ask if it was because of him, Morcerf, that Danglars was withdrawing his consent. That evening he had a long meeting with several of his friends, and Monsieur Cavalcanti, who had remained constantly in the salon with the ladies, was the last to leave the banker's house. The next day, when he woke up, Danglars asked for the papers, and they were brought to him at once. He put 3 or 4 aside, and picked up L'Impartial. This was the one managed and edited by Beauchamp. He quickly tore off the wrapper, opened it with nervous haste, cast a contemptuous eye over the home news, and came to the News in Brief, where he stopped with a malicious grin at an item beginning with the words, "A correspondent writes from Janina." "Very well," he said after reading it. "There is a little piece on Colonel Fernand which will quite probably relieve me of the obligation to give the Comte de Morcerf any further explanation." At this same moment, which is to say just as 9 o'clock was striking, Albert de Morcerf, dressed in black and neatly buttoned up, arrived at the house in the Champs-Élysées in a state of some agitation, and curtly asked for the Count. "Monsieur le Comte went out some half an hour ago," said the concierge. "Did he take Baptistin with him?" Morcerf asked. "No, Monsieur le Vicomte." "Call Baptistin. I wish to speak with him." The concierge went to look for the valet himself, and came back with him a short time later. "My friend," said Albert, "I beg you to forgive me for asking, but I wanted to find out from you whether your master is really not at home." "No, monsieur, he is not," Baptistin replied. "Even to me?" I know how happy my master is to receive monsieur, and I should be careful to exclude him from any general instruction. You are right, because I have a serious matter to discuss with him. Do you think he will be long? No, he ordered breakfast for 10 o'clock. Very well. I shall take a walk along the Champs-Élysées and be here at 10. If Monsieur le Comte returns before I do, ask him to be so good as to expect me. I shall. Monsieur may be sure of that. Albert left his hired cab at the Count's door and went off on foot. Walking past the Allée des Veuves, he thought he recognised the Count's horses standing at the door of Gossay's shooting gallery. He went over, and, having recognised the horses, now recognised the driver. "Is the Count shooting?" he asked him. "Yes, monsieur," the coachman replied. Several shots had rung out at regular intervals since Morcerf had approached the shooting gallery. He went in. The attendant was standing in the little garden. "I beg the Vicomte's pardon," he said, "but would you mind waiting for a moment?" "Why is that, Philippe?" Albert asked. Being a regular visitor, he was astonished at this incomprehensible barrier. "Because the gentleman who is practising at the moment hires the whole range for himself and never shoots in front of anyone." "Not even you, Philippe?" "As you see, monsieur, I am standing by the door to my office." "And who loads his pistols?" "His servant." "Do you know the gentleman, then?" Do you know the gentleman, then?" "I have come to find him. He's a friend." "Oh, that's a different matter. I'll go in and tell him." And Philippe, driven by curiosity, went to the shooting gallery. A moment later, Monte Cristo appeared at the door. "Please forgive me for following you here, my dear Count," said Albert, "and I must start by telling you that it was not the fault of your servants. I alone have been indiscreet. I went to your house and was told that you were out walking, but that you would return at 10 o'clock for breakfast. I also went out for a walk to pass the time, and it was then that I saw your horses in your carriage." "What you say leads me to hope that you have come to invite me to breakfast." No, thank you. There's no question of dining for the moment. Perhaps we may lunch together later, but I shall be poor company, confound it." "What on earth's the matter?" "My dear Count, I'm going to fight today." "You? How on earth is that?" "In a duel, of course." "Yes, I realise that, but for what reason? You understand, people fight for all sorts of reasons." "On a point of honour." "Ah, now, that's serious." "So serious that I have come to ask a favour of you." "Which is?" "To be my second." "Then it's really serious. Let's not discuss it here, but go home. Ali, some water." The Count rolled up his sleeves and went into the little hallway outside the shooting ranges, where the marksmen were accustomed to wash their hands. "Come in, Monsieur le Vicomte," Philippe whispered. "I've got something to show you." Morcerf followed him. Instead of targets, playing cards had been fixed to the board. From a distance, Morcerf thought it was a complete pack from the ace to the 10. "Huh," he said. "Were you playing piquet?" "No," said the Count. "I was making a pack of cards." What do you mean?" "Those are aces and twos that you see. My bullets made them into 3s, 5s, 7s, 8s, 9s and 10s. Albert went over to look, and saw that, indeed, the bullets had replaced the absent symbols with perfectly precise holes at perfectly equal distances, passing through each card at the points where it should have been painted. As he was walking across to the board, Morcerf also picked up 2 or 3 swallows that the Count had shot when they were rash enough to fly within range of his pistol. "I'll be damned," said Albert. "What do you expect, my dear Viscount?" Monte Cristo said, wiping his hands on a towel that Ali brought. "I must fill in my idle moments. Come now, let's go." They both got into Monte Cristo's coupe, and a few minutes later it put them down at the door of number 30. Monte Cristo showed Morcerf into his study and offered him a seat. They sat down. "Now, let's discuss this calmly," the Count said. "As you can see, I am perfectly calm." "Who are you going to fight?" "Beauchamp." "But he's a friend of yours." "It's always one's friends that one fights." "But you must at least have a reason." "I do." "What has he done to you?" "In last night's newspaper there was... but read it for yourself." And Albert handed Monte Cristo a paper in which he read the following. "A correspondent writes from Janina. We have learnt a fact which has remained unknown, or at least unpublished up to now. The castles defending the town were betrayed to the Turks by a French officer in whom the vizier, Ali Tebelin, had placed all his trust. His name was Fernand." "Well," said Monte Cristo, "what have you found in that to shock you?" "What have I found?" "Yes. What does it matter to you that the castles of Janina were betrayed to the Turks by an officer called Fernand?" "It matters because my father, the Comte de Morcerf, was christened Fernand." "And your father served under Ali Pasha?" "He fought for the independence of Greece. That is the slander." "Come down, my dear Viscount, be reasonable." "I ask nothing better." "So tell me, who the devil in France knows that this officer Fernand is the same as the Comte de Morcerf, and who today cares at all about Janina, which was captured in 1822 or 1823, I believe?" "This is precisely what is so perfidious. They have let time pass, and only now do they dig up these forgotten events to turn them into a scandal that might tarnish a man in a prominent position. Well, as the heir to my father's name, I should not like even the shadow of a doubt to hang over it. I shall send 2 seconds to Beauchamp, whose paper published this article, and he will retract it." "Beauchamp will retract nothing." "Then we must fight." "No, you will not, because he will retort that there were perhaps 50 officers with the name Fernand in the Greek army." "We shall fight for all that. Oh, how I wish this could all go away! My father, such a noble soldier, such an illustrious career." Or else he can write, "We have every reason to believe that the Fernand in question has nothing to do with Monsieur le Comte de Morcerf, whose given name is also Fernand." No, I must have a full and total retraction. That would not be enough." "So you are going to send him your seconds?" "Yes." "You are wrong." "That is to say, you refuse me the service I asked you?" "Oh, you know what I think about duels. I explained my ideas to you in Rome, don't you remember?" "Despite which, my dear Count, I found you just now, this very morning, engaged in a pastime that seems to accord ill with those ideas." "Because you must understand, my dear friend, one should never be exclusive. When one lives among madmen, one should train as a maniac. From one minute to the next, some hothead, with no greater reason to seek a quarrel with me than you have to seek one with Beauchamp, will come and hunt me out on the first flimsy pretext he can find, or send me his seconds, or insult me in a public place. Well, I shall be obliged to kill him." "So you admit that you would fight?" "Heavens, yes." "So why do you want to prevent me from doing the same?" "I'm not saying that you should not fight. I'm just saying that a duel is a serious matter which demands reflection." "Did he reflect, do you think, before insulting my father?" "If he didn't, and he admits as much, you should not hold it against him." "My dear Count, you are too indulgent by half." "And you are too stringent by half. Come now, just imagine—" Listen, just imagine. Now, don't be angry with what I am about to say." "I'm listening." Just suppose the fact he published was true. No son should admit such a supposition touching his father's honour. Good Lord, but we live in times when so many things are allowed, which is precisely the vice of the times. Are you attempting to reform them? Yes, when it affects me. What a moralist you are, dear boy. That's the way I am made. Are you beyond the reach of good advice? No, not when it comes from a friend. Do you count me as one? Yes. Then, before sending your seconds to Beauchamp, discover the facts. From whom? Well, for example, from Haydée. Involve a woman in this? What could she do? Tell you that your father had nothing to do with the overthrow or death of her father, for example, or enlighten you on the subject if by chance your father did have the misfortune. I have already told you, my dear Count, that I cannot admit such a possibility. So you refuse to adopt this solution? I do. Absolutely? Absolutely. Then one last piece of advice. Yes, but let it be the last. Don't you want it? On the contrary, I ask you to give it to me. Don't send your seconds to Beauchamp. Why? Go and see him yourself. That's not done. It would be most unconventional. Your affair is not a conventional one. So why must I go myself, then? Because in that way the matter will remain between you and Beauchamp. Explain. Of course, if Beauchamp is inclined to retract, you must leave him with the merit of his goodwill. The retraction will be made just as surely. If he refuses, on the contrary, it will be time to confide your secret to two strangers. They will not be strangers, but friends. Today's friends are tomorrow's enemies. What a thing to say! Look at Beauchamp. So I advise caution. So you think I should go and see Beauchamp myself? Yes. Alone? Alone. When you want to obtain something touching a man's self-respect, you must spare his pride even the appearance of suffering. I think you are right. I'm very glad to hear it. I shall go alone. Good, but you would do better not to go at all. That's impossible. So do as you say. It is still preferable to what you intended. In that case, tell me, if, despite all my efforts and all my approaches, I still have a duel, will you serve as my second? My dear Viscount, Monte Cristo said with the utmost gravity, you must have seen that I am devoted to you at any time or place, but the service you ask of me falls outside the range of those that I can perform for you. Why is that? You may perhaps find out one day. And meanwhile, I beg your indulgence for my secret. Very well, I shall take Franz and Chateau Renard. Do so, they will suit perfectly. But at least, if I do have to fight, you will at least give me a little training with the épée or the pistol. No, that too is impossible. What an odd fellow you are indeed. So you don't want anything to do with it? Absolutely nothing. Very well, we'll say no more. Farewell, Count. Farewell, Viscount. Morcerf took his hat and went out. At the door he picked up his cab, and, repressing his anger as best he could, asked to be driven to Beauchamp's. Beauchamp was at his newspaper, so Albert had the driver proceed there. Beauchamp was in an office which was dark and dusty, as newspaper offices are from the day they open for business. Albert de Morcerf was announced. He had the name repeated twice, then, still incredulous, called out, "Enter!" Albert appeared. Beauchamp gave a cry as he saw his friend struggling over bundles of paper and stubbing his unpractised toes against the newspapers of every size that littered not the wooden but the red-tiled floor of his office. This way, my dear Albert," he said, offering the young man his hand. "What the devil brings you? Are you lost like Tom Thumb? Or have you just come to invite me to lunch? Try to find a chair. Look, there's one over there by the geranium. The plant alone persuades me that there are leaves in the world that are not leaves of paper." "It's about your paper, Beauchamp, that I have come to talk to you," Albert said. "You, Morcerf? What do you want?" "A retraction." "You, a retraction? About what, Albert? Do sit down." "Thank you," Albert said for the second time, with a slight nod. "Now, explain." "A retraction on a matter that sullies the honour of a member of my family." Come, Beauchamp said in surprise. "What matter? It's not possible." "The matter that your correspondent writes from Janina." "Janina?" "Yes, Janina. You really do seem not to know why I am here." I swear I do not. Baptiste, yesterday's paper," Beauchamp shouted. "No need, I've brought my own copy." Beauchamp read the passage, muttering, "A correspondent writes from Janina." "You see that it is a serious matter," Morcerf said when Beauchamp had finished. "This officer is a relation of yours?" the journalist asked. "Yes," Albert replied, blushing. "So what would you like me to do for you?" Beauchamp asked gently. "What I want, my dear Beauchamp, is for you to print a retraction." Beauchamp looked at Albert attentively and visibly with a great deal of goodwill. "Let's see now," he said. "This is going to be a long discussion because a retraction is always a serious matter. Sit down and I shall read the 3 or 4 lines again." Albert sat down, and Beauchamp reread the offending words more attentively than the first time. "There," said Albert firmly, and even roughly. "You see, someone of my family has been insulted in your newspaper, and I want a retraction." "You want?" "Yes, I want." "May I point out, my dear Viscount, that you are not addressing the House?" "I have no wish to do so," the young man retorted, standing up. "I am seeking retraction of an item that you published yesterday, and I shall obtain it. You are enough of a friend," Albert went on through clenched teeth, seeing that Beauchamp was also beginning to adopt an air of injured pride. "You are enough of a friend, and consequently know me well enough, I hope, to understand my tenacity in such circumstances." "I may be your friend, Morcerf, but eventually you will make me forget it with words such as those you have just used. Come now, let's not get angry with one another, at least not yet. You are upset, annoyed, irritated. So tell me, who is this relation called Fernand?" "My father, no less," Albert said. "Fernand Mondego, Count of Morcerf, an old soldier who fought on 20 battlefields, whose noble scars are now being spattered with filthy mud from the roadside." "Your father?" Beauchamp said. "That's another matter. I can understand your indignation, my dear Albert. So let's have another look at this." And he reread the note, this time weighing each word. "But how do you know that this Fernand in the paper is your father?" Beauchamp asked. "I don't, of course, but others will. That is why I want the item to be denied." At those words, "I want," Beauchamp looked at Morcerf, then almost at once looked down again and thought for a moment. "You will retract it, won't you, Beauchamp?" Morcerf went on, with still contained but increasing anger. "Yes," said Beauchamp. "At last!" Albert exclaimed. "But only when I am certain that the allegation is false." What? The matter is worth clarifying, and I shall do so. But what is there to clarify in all this, monsieur? Said Albert beside himself. If you do not believe it is my father, say so at once. If you do believe it was him, then prepare to answer to me for that belief. Beauchamp looked at Albert with his own particular smile that could accommodate itself to every emotion. Monsieur, he continued, since we are on such terms, if you came here to challenge me, then you should have done so straight away and not started talking about friendship and other tiresome matters of that kind, which I have been patiently listening to for the past half hour. If this is how things are to be between us from now on, tell me. They will, unless you retract that infamous slander. One moment. No threats, please, Monsieur Albert Mondego, Vicomte de Morcerf. I won't stand for them from my enemies, and still less from my friends. So, you want me to deny the report about Colonel Fernand, a report in which, on my honour, I had no part? Yes, that is what I want, said Albert, his head starting to spin. Otherwise we fight? Beauchamp went on, as calmly as before. Yes! Albert repeated, his voice rising to a crescendo. Very well, said Beauchamp. Here is my reply, my dear sir. This report was not published by me, and I had no knowledge of it, but you yourself have brought it to my attention, and now I am interested. So the report will stand until it is either confirmed or denied by the proper authorities. In that case, monsieur, Albert said, I shall have the honour to send you my seconds. You may discuss the place and weapons with them. Precisely, my dear sir. And we shall meet this evening, if you wish, or at the latest tomorrow. No, not so fast. I shall be here when the time comes, and in my opinion, which I have the right to give, since I am the one who has been provoked, in my opinion, as I say, the time is not yet. I know that you are a good swordsman, and I am a fair one. I know that you can hit 3 bull's-eyes out of 6, which is roughly my own score. I know that a duel between us will be a serious matter, because you are a brave fellow, and, well, I am too. Consequently, I do not want to risk killing you or being killed by you for no reason. Now, I shall in turn ask you the question, and quite categorically, are you so set on this retraction that you will kill me if I do not make it, even though I have told you, and repeat to you, and swear on my honour that I was not aware of this report? And even though it would be impossible for anyone except a Jean Jaffé like yourself to guess that Monsieur the Comte de Morcerf might be referred to under that name, Fernand. I am absolutely set on it. Very well, my good sir. I agree to cut my throat with you, but I want 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, come back, and I shall either tell you, yes, the report is false, I shall annul it, or else, yes, the report is true, and I get the swords out of their scabbards or the pistols from their cases, as you wish. 3 weeks? Albert cried. But 3 weeks are 3 centuries in which I shall be dishonoured. If you had remained my friend, I should say to you, patience, friend. But you have made yourself my enemy, and I say to you, what do I care, monsieur? Very well. In 3 weeks. Agreed, said Morcerf. But consider this. In 3 weeks there will be no more delays, and no subterfuge that you can use to avoid Monsieur Albert de Morcerf, Beauchamp said, getting up in his turn. I cannot throw you out of the window for another 3 weeks, that is to say 24 days, and you will only have the right to assault me at that time. It is now August the 29th, so on the 21st of September, until then, and this is a piece of advice from a gentleman, please let us spare one another the barking of bulldogs who cannot reach each other because they are chained. And Bowing to the young man, he turned his back on him and went through into the printing works. Albert took his feelings out on a pile of newspapers, which he spread across the room with sweeping blows from his stick. After that he left, but not without 2 or 3 backward glances towards the door of the printing works. After crossing the boulevard, Albert began whipping the front of his carriage, just as he had whipped the innocent papers, black with ink, which could do nothing to ease his frustration. At that moment he noticed Morel, who, head held high, with sparkling eyes and freely swinging arms, was walking along in front of the Chinese baths from the direction of the Porte Saint-Martin and going towards the Madeleine. "Ah," Albert thought with a sigh, "there's a contented man." As it happens, he was not wrong. And I think there we shall take a break. Ooh, more drama. Much more drama. Also, thank you very much. Sean Moore, thank you very much for the raid. That's very kind of you indeed. And welcome all you people who have come on over from the raid. Yes, I'm suddenly Jonathan Ross. Yeah, lovely to see you all. Hope you're all doing well. Hope your stream was good. Yeah, this is. I think you've read us. Oh my goodness me! I do the reading. I think you've raided us before, but if not, hi, I am Lucy. Sam is in chat. We are Literacy. We read books to people on the interwebs, and this is currently some way through. I'd say maybe just over 2/3 through the Count of Monte Cristo. So you sort of jumped in at one of the most dramatic times, so you get all the drama, all the French drama. It's great. But yes, we shall hop to a break. So go do break things, and we will see you back in about 5 minutes. Bye for now. we are back from the break. I hope everybody has had a good break. I refilled my water, thought about getting a cup of tea, thought no, it's far too hot for that, so decided against it. It's a twisty-turny, lurid thriller. Yes, that is exactly. Also a rip-roaring yarn and other such things. But yeah, I really like Dumas. Dumas, yeah, someone I've been meaning to read, like, basically all of his stuff for yonks. Need to read Musketeers. There we go. Need to read that. Man in the Iron Mask as well. Although I've been told that's not so great, but well, not as good as the others. But yeah, when I set myself the challenge of reading Count of Monte Cristo on these streams, I expected it to be very kind of Herman Melville level of filler, like here's some facts about French Revolution or something like that. But turns out it's not. And I like the fact that I at least, I don't know if anyone listening, but I at least can keep track of all the characters, and they're all. Nope, that was Jules. I mean, yes, it was also Jules Verne. Herman Melville's just as bad, if not worse. Herman Melville is. Do you know this fact about whales? No? Well, I'm going to tell you. Here's some whales information. But yes. But I'm glad you like Dumas, Masflas. Also, thank you very much for the follow. That's very kind of you indeed. But yes. You need to read more Voltaire off that Micro Mega story. Yeah. He's written some good stuff, I think. I have not read any. Ah, the next chapter's called Lemonade. That's amusing. Right, how many more chapters can we get through tonight? Let's have a look, shall we? Right, probably 2. We'll see. But yes, I hope we are all sitting comfortably and are doing well. And we shall continue with Chapter 79, Lemonade. Morel was indeed very contented. Monsieur Nortier had just sent for him, and he was in such a hurry to know why that he had not taken a cab, trusting his own 2 legs more than those of a hired horse. He had set out at a fair pace from the Rue Meslay, and was on his way to the Faubourg Saint-Honoré. He was proceeding at a jog, while poor Barrois followed on as best he could. Morel was 31, Barrois 60. Morel was drunk with love, Barrois faint with heat. The 2 men, so different in age and interests, were like 2 sides of a triangle, separated at the base, meeting at the apex. The apex was Nortier. He had told Morel to make haste, and Morel, much to the despair of Barrois, was following this instruction precisely. When they arrived, Morel was not even out of breath. Love gives wings, but Barrois, who had not been in love for a long time, was pouring with sweat. The old servant showed Morel in by the side entrance and closed the study door. Soon the sound of a dress brushing up against the floor announced the arrival of Valentine. She was ravishingly beautiful in her mourning clothes. The dream was becoming so sweet that Morel would almost have done without talking to Nortier, but the old man's wheelchair could soon be heard outside, and he came in. With a benevolent smile, Nortier accepted the thanks which Morel heaped upon him for the miraculous intervention that had saved Valentine and himself from despair. Then Morel's look turned towards the young woman, inquiring of her the reason why he was newly in favour. She, shyly sitting at some distance from Morel, was waiting to speak until she was obliged to. Nortier looked at her in turn. "Must I say what you told me to, then?" she asked. "Yes," Nortier indicated. "Monsieur Morel," Valentine said, addressing the young man who was devouring her with his eyes, "my grandpapa Nortier had 1,000 things to tell you, and he has told them to me in the past 3 days. Today he has sent for you so that I can repeat them. I shall do so, since he has chosen me as his interpreter, without changing a word of his meaning." "I am impatient to hear," the young man replied. "Please speak, mademoiselle, speak." Valentine lowered her eyes. This was a sign that seemed to Morel to augur well. Valentine was weak only when she was happy. "My grandfather wants to leave this house," she said. "Barrois is trying to find him suitable lodgings." "What about you, mademoiselle?" said Morel. "You who are so dear and so essential to Monsieur Noirtier." "I shall not abandon my grandfather," the young woman said. "This has been agreed between us. My apartment will be near his. Either I shall have Monsieur de Villefort's consent to go and live with Grandpapa Noirtier, or it will be refused. In the first case I shall leave at once. In the second I shall await my majority, which falls in 18 months. Then I shall be free. I shall have independent means and—" "And?" said Morel. "And, with my grandfather's permission, I shall keep the promise that I made to you." Valentine spoke these last words so softly that Morel would have been unable to hear them had they not meant as much to him as they did. "Isn't that your opinion, Grandpa?" she added, turning to Noirtier. "Yes," said the old man. "Once I am settled in at my grandfather's," Valentine added, "Monsieur Morel will be able to come and visit me in the presence of this good and worthy protector. Our hearts may be ignorant or capricious, but if the bond that they have started to form seems respectable and gives some guarantees of future happiness to our endeavour, though, alas, they do say that hearts which are fired to overcome obstacles go cold when those are removed, then Monsieur Morel can ask me for my hand. I shall wait for him." "Oh!" cried Morel, tempted to kneel in front of the old man as before God, and in front of Valentine as before an angel. "Oh, what have I done in my life to deserve such happiness?" "Until then," the young woman continued in her clear, strict voice, "we shall respect the conventions, and even the will of our parents, provided that will does not attempt to separate us for ever. In a word, and I repeat it because it says everything, we shall wait." "I swear to carry out the sacrifices that the word imposes, monsieur," Morel said, "not with resignation, but with joy." "So," Valentine went on, with a look that was very dear to Maximilien's heart, "no more rash deeds, my friend. Do not compromise one who, from today onwards, considers herself destined to bear your name with purity and dignity." Morel put his hand to his heart. During this time, Noirtier was watching them both tenderly. Barrois, who had stayed at the back of the room, as someone from whom they had nothing to hide, was smiling and wiping the huge beads of sweat that coursed across his bald head. "Heavens above, look how hot he is, poor Barrois," said Valentine. "That's because I had a good run, mademoiselle," Barrois said. "But I must grant him this, Monsieur Morel ran even faster than I did." Noirtier's eyes turned towards a tray on which were a carafe of lemonade and a glass. Half an hour earlier, Noirtier himself had drunk what was missing from the jug. "Oh, go on, my dear Barrois," the girl said. "Have it. I can see that you are casting envious looks at that half-empty jug." "The fact is," he replied, "I'm dying of thirst, and I should dearly like to drink a glass of lemonade to your health." "Go on, then," said Valentine. "Come back in a moment." Barrois took the tray, and no sooner was he in the corridor than they saw him, through the door that he had forgotten to close, toss back his head to empty the glass that Valentine had filled. Valentine and Morel were exchanging farewells in Noirtier's presence when they heard the bell ring in Villefort's staircase. It was the signal that someone was coming to visit. Valentine looked at the clock. "It is midday," she said, And as today is Saturday, Grandpapa, this must be the doctor. Noirtier made a sign confirming that he agreed with her. Since he is going to come here, Monsieur Morel must leave, mustn't he, Grandpapa? Yes, the old man replied. Barrois, Valentine called. Barrois, come here. They heard the voice of the old servant answer, I'm coming, mademoiselle. Barrois will take you to the door, Valentine said to Morel. Now, Captain, remember one thing, which is that my grandfather advises you not to do anything which might threaten our future happiness. I promise to wait, said Morel, and I shall. At this moment Barrois came in. Who rang? Valentine asked. Dr. d'Avrigny, Barrois said, staggering. What's wrong, Barrois? Valentine asked. The old man did not reply. He was looking at his master with panic-stricken eyes, while his hand grasped for something to hold on to keep him upright. He's going to fall, Morel cried. The trembling in Barrois's limbs was increasing at an alarming rate, and his expression was contorted by the contractions of the muscles, suggesting a violent nervous seizure. Noirtier, seeing Barrois's distress, gave a succession of looks that clearly and plainly expressed all the emotions that he was feeling. Barrois took a few steps towards his master. "Oh, my God!" he exclaimed. "What is wrong with me? I am in such pain. I can no longer see. There are 1,000 burning embers in my brain. Oh, don't touch me! Don't touch me!" His eyes began to bulge, distraught, and his head fell backwards, while the rest of his body stiffened. Valentine gave a cry of terror, and Morel took her in his arms, as though to defend her against some unknown danger. "Monsieur d'Avrigny! Monsieur d'Avrigny!" she cried in a strangled voice. "Come here! Help!" Barrois wheeled around, took 3 steps backwards, staggered, and fell at Noirtier's feet, resting his hand on his knee and gasping, "My master! My good master!" At that moment, Monsieur de Villefort appeared on the threshold of the room, attracted by the commotion. Morel let go of the half-unconscious Valentine and leapt back, hiding in a corner of the room where he was partly concealed by a curtain. Pale, as if he had seen a snake rearing up before him, he stared in horror at the dying man. Noirtier was burning with impatience and terror. His soul flew to the aid of the poor old man, a friend rather than a servant. One could see the life-and-death struggle on his brow by the bulging of the veins and the contraction of the few muscles that were still living around his eyes. Barrois, with a tortured expression, bloodshot eyes and head thrown back, was lying on the floor, beating it with his hands, while his legs, on the contrary, were so stiff that they seemed liable to break rather than bend. Traces of foam had appeared around his lips, and he was gasping painfully. Villefort, astonished, remained for a moment staring at this scene, which is what had drawn his attention as soon as he entered. He had not seen Morel. After an instant of mute contemplation, in which his face paled and his hair stood on end, he cried, "Doctor! Doctor, come quickly!" as he rushed to the door. "Madame! Madame!" Valentine cried, calling her stepmother and dashing herself against the walls of the stairway. Come quickly and bring your smelling salts." "What is the matter?" asked the self-possessed, metallic voice of Madame de Villefort. "Oh, please come, quickly!" "But where is the doctor?" Villefort cried. "Where has he gone?" Madame de Villefort came slowly down. They could hear the boards creaking under her feet. In one hand she held a handkerchief with which she was wiping her face, in the other a flask of English smelling salts. Her first glance, as she reached the door, was for Noirtier, whose face showed his condition was unaltered, apart from the anxiety natural in such circumstances. Only then did she turn to look at the dying man. She went pale, and her eyes flashed, as it were, from the servant to the master. But in heaven's name, madame, where's the doctor? He went into your apartments. It's an apoplexy, as you can see, and if he is bled, we can save him. Has he eaten anything recently? Madame de Villefort asked, evading the question. He has had nothing to eat, madame, said Valentine, but he ran very hard this morning on an errand for grandpapa. The only thing he had on his return was a glass of lemonade. Oh, said Madame de Villefort, why not wine? Lemonade is very bad for you. The lemonade was right here in grandpapa's jug. Poor Barrois was thirsty, so he drank what he had to hand. Madame de Villefort shuddered. Noirtier fixed her with his penetrating eyes. His neck is so short, she said. Madame, said Villefort, you must tell us where Monsieur d'Avrigny is. In heaven's name, answer. He is with Edouard, who is slightly unwell, in his room, she said, unable to evade the question any longer. Villefort dashed to the stairs himself to fetch the doctor. Here, the young woman said, giving her flask to Valentine. I expect they will bleed him. I'll go back to my room. I can't stand the sight of blood. And she followed her husband. Morel emerged from the dark corner where he had concealed himself and remained unseen during the commotion. Go quickly, Maximilien, Valentine said, and wait until I call for you. Go! Morel made a gesture to ask Noirtier's opinion, and the old man, who had kept himself under control, indicated that he should do as she said. He pressed Valentine's hand to his heart and went out through the hidden passage. As he was doing so, Villefort and the doctor came in through the opposite door. Barrois was starting to regain his senses. The crisis had passed. He could groan a few words, and he raised himself on one knee. d'Avrigny and Villefort carried him to a chaise-longue. "What do you prescribe, doctor?" asked Villefort. "Bring me water and ether. Do you have some in the house?" "We do." "Go and fetch me some oil of terebinth and an emetic." "Go on," Villefort commanded. "Now everyone must leave." "Including me?" Valentine asked timidly. "Yes, mademoiselle, especially you," the doctor said harshly. Valentine looked at him in astonishment, kissed Monsieur Noirtier on the forehead, and went out. The doctor emphatically closed the door behind her. "There now, doctor, he's coming round. It was only some mild seizure." Monsieur d'Avrigny gave a grim smile. "How do you feel, Barrois?" he asked. A little better, monsieur." "Can you drink this glass of etherized water?" "I can try, but don't touch me." "Why not?" "Because I feel that if you were to touch me, even with the tip of a finger, I should suffer another attack." "Drink it." Barrois took the glass, lifted it to his purple lips, and drank about half of what was in it. "Where is the pain?" asked the doctor. "Everywhere. It's like frightful cramps." "Do you feel dizzy?" "Yes." "Is there a ringing in your ears?" "Dreadful." "When did it start?" "Just a short while ago." "Very suddenly?" "Like a thunderbolt." "Nothing yesterday or the day before?" "Nothing." "No sleepiness, no lassitude?" "No." "What have you eaten today?" "Nothing. I just took a glass of Monsieur's lemonade, that's all." And Barrois nodded towards Noirtier, sitting motionless in his chair and watching this dreadful scene without missing a movement or a word. "Where is this lemonade?" the doctor asked urgently. "Outside in the jug." "What do you mean by outside?" "In the kitchen." "Would you like me to fetch it, doctor?" Villefort asked. "No, stay here and try to make the patient drink the rest of this glass of water." "But The lemonade, I'll go myself. Daphne leapt up, opened the door and ran out onto the service stairs, where he almost knocked over Madame de Villefort. She, too, was going down to the kitchen. She cried out. Daphne took no notice, his mind fixed on one single idea. He jumped the last 3 or 4 stairs, hurried into the kitchen and, seeing the little jug standing there, 3/4 empty, pounced on it like an eagle on its prey. Panting for breath, he went back to the ground floor and into Monsieur Noirtier's room. Madame de Villefort slowly went back up the stairs towards her apartment. "Is this the jug?" Daphne asked. "Yes, doctor." "And this lemonade is the same that you drank?" "I think so." "How did it taste?" "Bitter." The doctor poured a few drops of lemonade into the palm of his hand, sniffed it, and after washing it round his mouth as one does when tasting wine, spat the liquid into the fireplace. "It must be the same," he said. "Did you also drink it, Monsieur Noirtier?" "Yes," said the old man. "And you noticed this same bitter taste?" "Yes." Oh, doctor," Barrois said, it's starting again. Oh, God! Oh, Lord, have pity on me!" The doctor hurried across to the sick man. "Villefort," he said, "see if the emetic is coming." Villefort hurried out, shouting, "The emetic! Has anyone brought the emetic?" There was no answer. The whole house was gripped with a profound sense of terror. "If I had some means of getting air into his lungs," Daphne said, looking around about him, "there might be perhaps some hope of avoiding asphyxia. But there is nothing! Nothing!" "Oh, monsieur," Barrois cried, "will you let me die without aid? Oh, I am dying! My God, I'm dying!" "A quill! A quill!" said the doctor. Then he noticed a pen on the table. He tried to force it into the patient's mouth. Barrois, in his convulsions, was vainly trying to vomit. His jaw was so rigid that the quill could not pass through it. He was now in the grip of a nervous attack even more powerful than before. He slid from the chaise-longue to the floor and lay there, rigid. The doctor, powerless to relieve his agony, left him and went over to Noirtier. "How do you feel?" he said to him in an urgent whisper. "Well?" "Yes." "Does your stomach feel heavy or light?" "Light?" "Yes." "As it does when you take the pill I make for you every Sunday?" "Yes." "Did Barrois make your lemonade?" "Yes." "And did you urge him to drink some of it?" "No." "Was it Monsieur de Villefort?" "No." "Madame?" "No." "Valentine, then?" "Yes." Davrigny's attention was drawn by a sigh from Barrois, a yawn that seemed to make his jawbone crack. He left Noirtier and hurried to the patient's side. "Barrois," he said, "can you speak?" Barrois muttered a few unintelligible words. "Try to speak, my friend." Barrois reopened his bloodshot eyes. "Who made the lemonade?" "I did." "Did you take it to your master as soon as it was made?" "No." "So you left it somewhere then?" "In the scullery. I was called away." "And who brought it here?" "Mademoiselle Valentine." Davrigny beat his brow. "Oh, my God," he murmured. "Oh, my God." "Doctor! Doctor!" Barrois cried, feeling the onset of another attack. "Will no one bring that emetic?" the doctor shouted. "Here is a glass of it ready prepared," said Villefort, coming back into the room. "By whom?" "By the pharmacist's apprentice who came with me." "Drink." "I can't, doctor. It's too late. My throat is too tight. I'm suffocating. Oh, my heart, my head. Oh, what hell. Must I suffer this much longer?" No, my friend," the doctor said. Soon you will suffer no longer." I understand," said the unfortunate man. "My God, have pity on me." And, with a cry, he fell back as though struck by lightning. Daphne put a hand to his heart and held a mirror to his lips. Well? Asked Villefort. Go to the kitchen and ask them to bring me some syrup of violets. Villefort left at once. Don't worry, Monsieur Noirtier, d'Avrigny said. I am taking the patient into another room to bleed him. This kind of attack is truly awful to see. Taking Barrois under the arms, he dragged him into the next room, but returned almost immediately to where Noirtier was, to fetch the rest of the lemonade. Noirtier closed his right eye. Valentine? You want Valentine? I'll tell them to send her to you. Villefort was coming back up, and d'Avrigny met him in the corridor. Well? He asked. Come with me, said d'Avrigny, leading the way into the bedroom. Is he still unconscious? The Crown Prosecutor asked. He is dead. Villefort stepped back, put his hands to his head, and with unfeigned pity looked at the corpse and said, So suddenly. Yes, very sudden, wasn't it? d'Avrigny said. But you shouldn't be surprised at that. Monsieur and Madame de Saint-Marin died just as suddenly. People die quickly in your family, Monsieur de Villefort. What? The magistrate exclaimed, in tones of horror and consternation. Are you still pursuing that awful notion? Yes, monsieur, I still am, d'Avrigny said solemnly. I have not had it out of my mind for an instant. And so that you can be quite convinced that this time I am not mistaken, listen carefully, Monsieur de Villefort. Villefort gave a convulsive shudder. There is a poison that kills almost without leaving any trace. I am well acquainted with this poison. I have studied all the effects that it produces and every symptom that results. I recognized this poison just now in poor Barrois, as I also recognized it in Madame de Saint-Marin. There is a way of detecting its presence. When litmus paper has been reddened by an acid, it will restore its blue colour, and it will give a green tint to syrup of violets. We do not have any litmus paper, but here they are with the syrup of violets that I asked for. There was a sound of footsteps in the corridor. The doctor opened the door and took a cup from the chambermaid. In it were 2 or 3 spoonfuls of syrup. As he closed the door, "Look," he said to the Crown Prosecutor, whose heart was beating so hard as to be almost audible. "Here in this cup I have some syrup of violets, and in this jug the remains of the lemonade, part of which was drunk by Barrois and Monsieur Noirtier. If the lemonade is pure and harmless, the syrup will not change colour. If the lemonade is poisoned, the syrup will turn green. Watch." The doctor slowly poured a few drops of lemonade from the jug into the cup, where a cloudy liquid instantly formed at the bottom. At first this cloud had a bluish tinge, then it turned to sapphire and opal, and finally from opal to emerald. When it reached this last colour, it settled, so to speak. The experiment was incontrovertible. Poor Barrois was poisoned with false angostura or Saint Ignatius's nut, d'Avrigny said. I will swear to it before God and man. For his part, Villefort said nothing, but raised his hands to heaven, opened wide his distraught eyes, and fell senseless onto a chair. Chapter 80. The Accusation. The magistrate seemed like a second corpse in this funerary chamber, but d'Avrigny soon brought him back to his senses. "Death is in my house," Villefort cried. "You should rather say crime," said the doctor. "Monsieur d'Avrigny," Villefort exclaimed, "I cannot tell you all that is going on in my mind at this moment. There is terror, pain, madness." "Yes, Monsieur d'Avrigny said with impressive calm. "But I think it is time to act. I think it is time we raised some barrier to stem this rising tide of mortality. For my part, I do not feel capable any longer of carrying the burden of such secrets without any prospect of immediate vengeance for society and the victims." Villefort cast a grim look around him. "In my house," he muttered, "in my house." "Come, judge," said d'Avrigny, "be a man. As the interpreter of the law, your honour demands a total sacrifice." "I am horrified at what you say, doctor. Sacrifice?" "That's what I said." "Do you suspect someone?" "I suspect nobody. Death knocks at your door. He enters, and, intelligent as he is, does not go blindly from one room to the next. Well, I follow in his footsteps. I recognize where he has passed by. I draw on the wisdom of the ancients, but I can only feel my way because of my friendship for your family, and my respect for you are like two blindfolds for me. Well, carry on, doctor. I shall have strength." "Well, monsieur, there is in your house, perhaps even in your family, one of those monstrous creatures which appear only once in 100 years. Locusta and Agrippina, living in the same century, were the exception that proved the determination of Providence to destroy the Roman Empire, which was sullied by so many crimes. Brunhot and Fredegonda were the product of a civilization painfully struggling to be born, at a time when mankind was learning to master the spirit, even were it to be by the emissary of darkness. Well, all these women had been or still were young and beautiful. On their brows had been seen or still blossomed that same flower of innocence that is to be found also on the guilty party who is in your house." Villefort gave a cry, clasped his hands and looked imploringly at the doctor, but the latter went on pitilessly. "There is an axiom of jurisprudence that tells us to look for the one who profits from the crime." But doctor," Villefort cried, "alas, doctor, how often has human justice not been deceived by those grim words? I do not know, but it seems to me that this crime—" "Ah, so you admit that the crime exists?" "Yes, I do. I must. What alternative is there? But let me continue. I was saying, it seems to me that this crime falls on me alone and not on the victims. I suspect that some disaster for me is intended behind all these strange disasters." "Oh, what is man?" d'Avrigny muttered. "The most egoistical of all animals, the most personal of all creatures, who cannot believe otherwise than the earth revolves, the sun shines, and death reaps for him alone. An ant, cursing God from the summit of a blade of grass." "And did those who lost their lives lose nothing then? Monsieur de Saint-Marin, Madame de Saint-Marin, Monsieur Nortier—" "What? Monsieur Nortier?" "Why, yes. Do you imagine this unfortunate servant was the intended victim? No, no. Like Polonius in Shakespeare, he died on behalf of another. It was Nortier who was meant to drink the lemonade. It was Nortier who did drink it, according to the logical expectation that he would. The other man drank only by chance. And even though it was Barrois who died, it was Nortier who should have done so." "But then how did my father manage not to succumb?" "I already told you why, one evening in the garden, after the death of Madame de Saint-Marin, because his body has become accustomed to the use of this very poison, because a dose that was trivial to him was fatal to anyone else, and finally because no one, not even the murderer, knows that for the past year I have been treating Monsieur Nortier's paralysis with brucine, though the murderer does know, and has proved, that brucine is a very effective poison." "My God," Villefort muttered, wringing his hands. "Follow the criminal's path. He kills Monsieur de Saint-Marin." "Oh, doctor, I would swear it. What I was told of the symptoms fits too well with the evidence of my own eyes. Villefort groaned, but ceased to argue. He, or she, kills Monsieur de Saint-Méran, the doctor repeated. She kills Madame de Saint-Méran, a double legacy to collect. Villefort wiped the sweat that was pouring down his brow. Listen. Alas, Villefort stammered, I am not missing a word, not a single word. Monsieur Noirtier's previous will, Monsieur d'Avrigny continued unsparingly, was against you, against your family, and in short, in favour of the poor. Monsieur Noirtier was spared. Nothing was expected of him. But no sooner has he destroyed his first will, and no sooner has he made a second one, than he is struck, doubtless because of fear that he will make a third. The will dates from yesterday, I believe? You see, there is no time to be lost. Oh, spare us! Spare no one, monsieur. The doctor has a sacred mission on earth. To fulfill it, he must go back to the wellspring of life and descend into the mysterious darkness of death. When a crime has been committed, and God, horrified no doubt, turns his face away from the criminal, it is the doctor's duty to say, "Here she is." "Spare my daughter, monsieur," Villefort muttered. "You see? You it was who named her. You, her own father." "Spare Valentine. Listen, it cannot be so. I would rather accuse myself. Valentine, that flower of innocence, that heart of diamond." "Spare no one, monsieur le procureur. The crime is blatant. Mademoiselle de Villefort herself wrapped up the medicine that was sent to Monsieur de Saint-Méran, and Monsieur de Saint-Méran died. Mademoiselle de Villefort prepared Madame de Saint-Méran's tisanes, and Madame de Saint-Méran died. When Barrois was sent outside, it was Mademoiselle de Villefort who took from him the jug of lemonade that the old man usually drank to the last drop of during a morning, and Monsieur Noirtier only escaped by a miracle. Mademoiselle de Villefort is the guilty party. She is the poisoner. Monsieur le procureur de Rouen, I denounce Mademoiselle de Villefort to you. Do your duty." "Doctor, I cannot offer any further resistance. I cannot deny anything. I believe you, but for pity's sake, spare my life and my honour." "Monsieur de Villefort," the doctor said with increasing energy, "there are some circumstances in which I must break all the bounds of foolish human caution. If your daughter had only committed one first crime, and I were to see her contemplating a second, I should say to you, warn her, punish her, let her spend the rest of her life in some cloister, some convent in prayer and lamentation. If she had committed a second crime, I should say to you, here, Monsieur de Villefort, here is a poison which has no known antidote, which is as quick as thought, as rapid as a bolt of lightning, and as deadly as a thunderbolt. Give her this poison, recommending her soul to God, and so save your honour and your life, because you are the one she hates. And I can see her creeping up to your bedside with her hypocritical smiles and her sweet exhortations. Woe betide you, Monsieur de Villefort, if you do not hasten to strike the first blow. That is what I should tell you if she had killed only 2 people. But she has contemplated 3 death agonies. She has considered 3 dying souls. She has knelt beside 3 bodies. To the scaffold with the poisoner, to the scaffold with her. You speak about your honour. Do what I tell you, and immortality awaits." Villefort fell to his knees. "Listen," he said, "I do not have your strength, or rather the strength that you would have if, instead of my daughter Valentine, you were speaking of your daughter Madeleine." The doctor went pale. "Doctor, every man who is the son of woman is born to suffer and die. I shall suffer, doctor, and I shall wait for death." "Beware," said Monsieur d'Avrigny. "It will be slow, this death. You will see it come after it has struck down your father, your wife, perhaps your son." Villefort clasped the doctor's arm, gasping for breath. "Listen," he said. "Pity me. Help me. No, my daughter is not guilty. Drag us before a court, and I shall say again, no, my daughter is not guilty. There is no crime in my house. Do you hear me? I do not want there to be crime in my house, because when crime enters somewhere, it is like death. It does not come alone. Listen, what does it matter to you if I die poisoned? Are you my friend? Are you a man? Have you a heart? No, you are a doctor. Well, I say to you, my daughter will not be dragged out by me to be delivered into the hands of an executioner. The very idea eats into my brain and urges me to tear out my heart with my fingernails. And suppose you were wrong, doctor. Suppose it was someone other than my daughter. Suppose one day I were to come to you, white as a ghost, and say, 'Murderer, you killed my daughter.' If that were to happen, even though I am a Christian, Monsieur d'Avrigny, I should kill myself." "Very well," the doctor said after a moment's silence. "I shall wait." Villefort looked at him as though still doubting his words. "There is just one thing," Monsieur d'Avrigny went on in a slow and solemn voice. "If anyone in your house should fall ill, if you yourself should be smitten, do not call me, because I shall not come. I agree to share this dreadful secret with you, but I do not want shame and remorse to come into me, growing and multiplying in my conscience, as crime and misfortune will grow and multiply in your house." "Are you abandoning me, then, doctor?" "Yes, because I cannot go further with you down this road, which leads only to the foot of the scaffold. Some other revelation will bring this dreadful tragedy to an end. Farewell. Doctor, I beg you. All the horrors that besmirch my thoughts make your house odious and fatal to me. Adieu, monsieur. Just one final word, doctor. You are leaving me to the full horror of this situation, a horror that has been increased by what you revealed to me. But how are we to explain the sudden death that struck down that poor servant?" "That's true," said Monsieur d'Avrigny. "Show me out." The doctor left first, with Villefort following. The servants were anxiously lining the corridors and stairways along which the doctor had to pass. "Monsieur," he said to Villefort, in a loud voice so that everyone could hear, "poor Barrois had been too sedentary for some years. At one time he used to love riding with his master or travelling by coach to the four corners of Europe, and this monotonous attendance beside a chair killed him. His blood thickened. He was stout, with a short, fat neck. He died of an apoplectic fit, and I was sent for too late. By the way," he added in a whisper, "make sure you throw that cup of violets into the fire." With that, not shaking Villefort's hand or revising any of his conclusions, the doctor left amid the tears and lamentations of all the family servants. That very evening, all the Villefort's domestic staff met in the kitchen and talked for a long time among themselves, then came to ask Madame de Villefort for permission to leave. No entreaty and no promise of an increase in wages could change their minds. To every offer they replied, "We wish to go because there is death in this house." So leave they did, in spite of pleading, and expressed deep regret at leaving such good employers, above all Mademoiselle Valentine, who was so kind, so generous, and so sweet. At these words, Villefort looked at Valentine. She was weeping. How odd it was! For all the confused feelings that he experienced on seeing those tears, he also managed to observe Madame de Villefort, and it seemed to him that a faint dark smile passed briefly across her thin lips, like one of those sinister meteors that can be glimpsed as they fall between two clouds against a stormy sky. And I think that is where we shall end for tonight.